also parallels what his mother tells him when he fails his demonstration to fire
time.
Lord Azula.
That's who you are.
This totally threw off my
Someone who
timetable.
keeps fighting even though it's hard.
But I want to
This
make this
is her
video,
role in
and I'm
shaping
stubborn,
Zuko's
so
character.
I'm going to get it done. Because we're going to get this bread. Okay, so, quick recap, because everything went to whole herbity-derp. So on Christian justice, judgment, and evil and suffering. If you have the wrong worldview of the biblical description of why there's evil and suffering in the world, then you won't be able to go and understand why God is needed in the world and what he actively has been doing in the world to help us all. So the idea is that, quickly kind of just hit everybody with it. The idea is this. So, before Adam and Eve, there was death and the ability to go and act against your natural instincts or what is best for all things that are part of creation. That was the original fall, the fall of the angels, the fall of the not the Watchers, but the fall of Lucifer and the original 1/3 of the angels. So then you have that fall. That leads into the whole sin of Adam and Eve between them and the serpent, and the idea that through that is when humanity as a species, though there was evil and death and decay anywhere in a universe where there wasn't the light and presence of God there, the actual physical presence of God, what happened was that when we sinned, when our species sinned on Earth, our forefathers, that spread the idea of the lack of presence of God. It basically allowed for God's presence to be pushed out by the distance of the earth. And so the idea is that as we pushed God out, we started to decay and be more able to die and decay. What happened then is from there, I'm sorry, I'm getting annoyed because of the whole internet flickering now. So what happened from there is that Cain and Abel happens, and that brings in murder and the line of warfare and conquest and the rise of the first ancient kingdoms. Not the ancient kingdoms we know from the Golden Age, but the pre-Golden Age, that ancient time that historians are still a little bit wonky about because we don't know what's myth or legend and what's historical now in terms of ancient societies and that kind of stuff, because it's so far back. It's like thousands upon thousands of years, they say. But these pre-human societies, they were before the flood. The flood came about because of the Watchers sinning with mankind. It wasn't just that mankind was sinning, but that there was a total domination of the earth by those who wished to convert the earth into a place of decay and death and recomposition. The idea is that they find that in order to become like God, the angels utilize forces and means of recomposition. They repurpose God's work in creation to produce their own works and their own displays of power and glory within the world. They're manipulators. And that's why magic in and of itself is a manipulation of the creative energies of the universe. So if you are with God, then naturally the forces of magic will come to you when it's necessary. When God needs you to do magical or supernatural things, it will happen. But if you seek that of your own accord, then what you're doing is you're harnessing or you're siphoning from the energy of creation out of your turn, out of your line, and out of your natural means. And thus you are stealing from God and repurposing it in order to create your own life and your own works. That was basically how witchcraft, magic, and false religion first got introduced into the earth, and those who had originally been against God into the flood, and those who were in line with the Nephilim and the fallen angels, all of those were wiped out, leaving Noah and the families. Those families then spread. As they populate the earth, they get it in their head, and I believe that came through them re-establishing contact with other Watchers and other fallen angels post-flood, because and then there was Nephilim after that age, basically after the flood as well. And there's plenty of accounts of Nephilim and giants and mighty men post-flood. So the idea is that they reintroduce themselves, they get humanity to build a ziggurat called the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Confusion was originally the Tower of the Gods, or the Gate to the Gods. It was basically a portal to the original banishment or prison of the Nephilim and those who had fallen beforehand. Basically, they were doing the angels orchestrated humanity to build a temple that would allow the angels that were outside of the prison, the pit of Gehenna, and Sheol, that whole area of the underworld. Basically, the idea was that they were trying to access the underworld and drag it up towards the heavens. Basically, reconnect the underworld with the heavens and free the fallen ones. And you see this in other Native American traditions where they talk about how there's another world that if you go in through certain passages in the earth, you will be able to enter into this other realm, this fallen realm. And same thing with the Greeks and Egyptian mythology, that if you travel through these portals, you'll be able to enter into the underworld, or you'll be lucky enough to be able to pass on to the above realm. These are figments of the original line coming from Abel of what God was trying to do to redeem humanity and the rest of the universe through the species of humanity, because we came after the original conflict that brought the conflict between Lucifer and Christ. So Christ was already at work in the universe doing everything, creating life and trying to restore life. We were created by which God was going to bring the full redemption and the reclamation of all of the universe. And so in this kind of idea, when the flood happens and we go into the Tower of Babel, God comes by and he confuses the languages of man. But when he does that, he specifically sorts them into several dozens of tribes. These dozens of tribes were all given authority, or their authority was given under the fallen angels. So there was a separation between man and God completely as a species at that point when the Tower of Babel happened. And out of that separation, God instead chose one family, the family of Abraham, in order to then reintroduce himself to humanity as a whole. And from that, he made the promise that he would build a nation out of them, and from that nation, all of the world will come to know him. And they would come to know salvation that is coming for all of creation. So, all along, there are people there are forces that have always been at work against God. They can't overcome God, but God can't remove them, because to do so would remove the element of himself. God doesn't act outside of his nature. So it's not that God can't remove evil. Anywhere God can remove evil or act against evil, God will. And so even in something as small as I am learning how to tie my shoes, or I'm having issues tying my shoes, you could pray on that and God will help you with it. The thing is that God can't enter into domains where God is not allowed, because God will not disrespect the will and the free will of humanity as a collective, and especially as an individual. So if you don't want God in your life, and then your society doesn't want God in their life, or you guys don't know about God, then you guys are fully devoted to whatever forces are around you, and they can manipulate you insofar as they wish. So evil and suffering is passed into the world through fallen angels, through powers and principalities who work through the flesh of men and manipulate the flesh of men through their environment. And this is why we talk about the idea of pathologies and parasites, the idea of these beings that try to infect you through the environment or through other people that they've already infected. Then you have the idea of Christian justice and judgment then coming from Christ, who comes to redeem people caught in this outer darkness, caught in this false imprisonment under these powers and principalities. He relinquishes their control by covering you in his essence and in his presence and in his nature. And insofar as you come into reconciliation with that nature and accept that nature now as the new you, you are able to then actually intercede and affect what is going on in your community in terms of evil and suffering. So evil and suffering exist in the world because, ironically enough, the world will not believe that it can be saved or redeemed. And because the world cannot believe in a redeemer or in a God that is actively working to redeem mankind from itself and from forces and powers that wish to manipulate mankind and pose as God to mankind, to use mankind against each other, then we will forever be in conflict. We will forever have suffering, evil. There will never be true justice. And insofar as there is no true justice, God will eventually have to then bring judgment to reconcile those whose plight are still heard even when they're dead. And so those who die in suffering and in injustice do seek justice in the end. And people who have killed others or have done things that are evil do have to answer for that. And that is something that we do not respect, because we don't focus on what the whole battle is. After this battle is done, he's divvying up the lines. He's divvying up the portions and the spoils of war. And more importantly, he is sentencing people. He's having a Nuremberg trials of the galactic scale, the universal scale, the cosmic scale that you cannot fathom. With all, not just humanity, but all life. If there is life out there, then that is going on trial. And we have a place in helping redeem the universe. I don't believe that we'll actually get out that far into the stars and meet other life forms. I do believe that there's life out there, but I believe that the ones that we do want to meet are protected by God from beings like us. And those who aren't are beings who will corrupt and or kill or consume beings like us, quickening the end of humanity and quickening the need for Christ to come back and bring us all back and to rebuild the universe again by removing these elements. So again, I think that kind of like Out of the Silent Planet, a series of books written by C.S. Lewis, I think that as the proper view of how the universe works in life and all that kind of stuff, and justice. So the quickest way of kind of comparing is that oftentimes when there is a hurricane, we blame God. Why was there a hurricane? But we often don't ask what sort of beings and deities are in control of the type of vices that are in control in that society. And if you look into the community and look into what vices or what's going on in there, ask yourselves, are there certain types of mythologies and faiths that talk about storm gods or sort of beings that control the weather, that manipulate these kind of things or desire offerings of human death in order to satisfy themselves? And if so, how would that apply to today's environment? Because that's more likely that a hurricane happened because of beings and citizens that we've given authority over this nation rather than God. And God instead is the one who's protecting people during the hurricane and providing relief for people during the hurricane insofar as they're willing to allow him to work in their community. So that's kind of the idea of it. Either way, I need to get going. Love you guys. Stay safe, shepherds. Bye.